Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Mel Stark. I'm the Managing Editor of MHD Supply Chain Solutions magazine. And it's my pleasure to bring to you today a panel of experts who will discuss a practical case study of the deployment of Internet of Things technology in supply chain operations. While the term Internet of Things was coined by a British tech pioneer more than 20 years ago, the supply chain industry has struggled to find an IoT-powered asset tracking solution that delivers real value, with many who explore this technology often coming to the conclusion that it's too expensive or it's too complex. So today we'll be hearing unique insights from real-world Australian case studies. We're joined by industry experts from Loscam, Thinxtra, and Active, who will share their experience with you and talk about how it benefits clients such as Mitsubishi Motors. During the webinar, we'll explore valuable insights into how to achieve economic viability and operational scalability with IoT solutions. So joining me today is Loic Barancourt. Loic is a pioneer and leader of IoT technology and is on a mission to solve operational inefficiencies and sustainability challenges with this technology. He's the CEO and co-founder of IoT telco Thinkstree. We're also lucky to be joined by David Bunnett. He's the Executive Vice President, Australia and New Zealand at Loscam. Loscam is a trusted name for providing pooling and returnable packaging solutions for use in supply chain and operates in 12 regions throughout the Asia Pacific. Daniel's been with the business for more than 20 years. Also, we've got Craig Stanford. Craig is the Director of Active, a managed solutions provider and specialist consultancy with more than 15 years experience in end-to-end supply chain and logistics solutions. So at the end of the webinar, there'll be plenty of time for you to submit questions, and we'll also send you a recording for your records. So let's kick things off. We'll start with a question for you, Loic. So could you just talk us through who Thinkstree is, and can you tell us also about your 0G network?
Yes, thanks, Mel, and glad to be here. Thinkstree was co-founded in 2015 with the purpose of really enabling the creation of operational efficiencies with the Internet of Things at scale in Australia to start with. So we are a telco, but dedicated to the IoT. We are backed by the Australian and New Zealand governments via their clean energy investment arms, because when you create efficiencies through a more connected Australia, you actually enable a faster path to carbon neutrality. So as the IoT telco, we built and operate the public 0G network in Australia, New Zealand, and Hong Kong. This public and nationwide infrastructure is used in the supply chain by companies that want to connect their assets. And it's quite popular because you can actually connect them with low power, very long battery life, low cost IoT trackers. So in summary, our role in the supply chain is to help companies such as Loscam make assets work harder and smarter.
Great, thanks, Loic. And how does that compare to other technologies in this area? So RFID, 3G, 4G, 5G networks?
So if you compare 0G with 3G, 4G, it's very much on the other end of the spectrum. So traditionally, telcos such as Telstra, Optus, or Vodafone would help companies connect assets onto their 3G, 4G networks. That's good for applications that need a lot of bandwidth, that need to send a lot of data. For instance, if you want to do remote surgery from Sydney in a hospital in Newcastle, then you would have to leverage 5G connectivity. That's a really good use case for that. But it's quite power hungry. So if you only need to send small messages 3 or 4, 5 times a day max from assets that don't have much to say, then 0G is a good application because it's designed to send very small amount of data a couple of times a day, but with very long battery life. So that's really the difference between 0G and 5G. What that means for companies that want to, in the supply chain, it means if you want to connect a non-powered asset like a GPAC, well, 0G would be a good fit. But you can also look at other non-powered assets like kegs, like metal pallets, and so on. If you compare zero-G with RFID, so RFID has been around for a long time. It's a great technology if you want to track assets within your warehouse, and if you have people that are that can ensure that the scanning is done properly. Either they do the scanning or make sure the assets go through the RFID gates. But outside of these areas that you do control, you don't have visibility, or it's really hard to enforce it. So that's where zero-G kicks in. It gives that next level of visibility at a national level without having to ask your customers or your customers' customers to deploy big RFID gates. So that's the difference with RFID.
Great, thank you, Loic. And we'll move over to Daniel from Loscam now. So Daniel, could you tell us a little bit about Loscam and the services that you provide?
Hi there, Mel. Firstly, thank you for the invitation to join this discussion, and hello to all of those who tuned in. Representing Loscam, which were founded in 1942, and manage returnable hire assets with a strong focus around supporting the retail supply chain. We've got a range of products, ranging everything from a plastic crate to a wooden pallet to higher value assets such as intermediate bulk containers, G-packs, stillages, and so on. So we operate across 12 regions across Asia Pacific, handling some 500 million odd equipment movements per annum. And within Australia and New Zealand, supporting around 3,500 active customers every day in moving their goods around the market.
Thanks, Daniel. And what was the motivation behind looking into leveraging IoT across your business?
So we're constantly looking at opportunities to improve the management of our assets out in the market. I think that for many people who have tuned in to this webcast would maybe talk about different experiences, whether it be in pallets or crates or stillages. And one of the great benefits of our business is that you can lease or hire an asset for a short period of time, for a period of time in which you need it. And then when you move it, along with the inventory, you transfer the responsibility, the hire charges to the next user. And so it avoids lots of double handling, reverse logistics, and so on. One of the challenges that's always been within our industry has been, the fact that occasionally things will be mismanaged, assets will go missing. And that could really negate the benefits of hiring the asset pretty quickly, particularly if you're hiring them for an extended period of time and then ultimately can't recover the asset and need to repay a replacement cost. So for us, our challenge has always been in sort of how we can encourage best practice in the market, and that's been explored in lots of different ways over the journey, with lots of different investments in IT software, in training arrangements, having local support teams going out there on site with customers. But for us, the big opportunity was always around trying to make the assets traceable through an IT solution, and so we've explored quite a few of those over the journey.
Great. And what were the, can you tell us a bit more about the assets you were interested in tracking, and maybe a bit more about the different solutions that you had explored previously?
Yeah, so certainly it sort of has been an extended journey for us, one of which I've been involved in. I can go back, I think, nearly 10, 15 years when we first got a very expensive GPS tracking unit, which probably cost $500 or $600 at that time, and it was rather bulky in size, and we were able to attach that to a side of a large stillage device. Then we had to arrange for the connectivity through likely a 3G network, and which again was very expensive at that time and remains quite expensive for their connectivity. And we had to sort of try and work around a battery life of just 48 hours, which was, again, wasn't very complementary to the manner in which our equipment moves. You wind the clock forward from there, and we've also looked at RFID solutions, which again sort of work, but really only as good as the first scan in and the last scan out. And it wasn't until we, with sort of coming across Loic and his team at Thinkstree, that all of a sudden we sort of got introduced to the zero-G or the IoT solution there, and all of a sudden it started to make a lot of sense for us because of the extensive coverage, the low cost of connectivity, and the flexibility around the different types of information in which will be able to be provided. And so it was sort of when we came across that we're able to say, okay, this is where we get serious around looking at proof of concepts.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Daniel. And I think we'll move over to Craig now. Craig, great to have you with us. Just to start with, could you just introduce us to Active and a bit of detail around how you work with Loscam?
Sure, thanks Mel, and good to be here virtually. Active provide managed logistics solutions for our customers, and we also do specialised consulting. And we look after both large and small companies here in Australia and New Zealand. Some of our clients include Mitsubishi, which we'll talk about a little bit more, Ateco Automotive, which are brands like Ram, LDV, Maserati, and we also look after Ford Australia in the automotive space. So every day we're delivering to over 400 dealers around the country in our automotive space. We also do some tailored business to consumer deliveries for companies like Sleeping Duck. And anyone who's in Melbourne, Sleeping Duck are on high rotation on all the radio. So that's mattress in a box. And we do that as well. And really we focus on creating a unique customer experience for our clients. And in automotive, which is what we're talking about today with Mitsubishi Motors, it's about creating a unique dealer experience. So in automotive, anyone who's familiar with automotive parts and accessories, very common that we pack, well, actually the warehouse packs automotive parts, which are often light. They can be damaged in transit if you think of a door panel or a roof panel or a bonnet. Some of it's quite easy to damage. So for large dealerships, it's very common that the warehouse will pack into G-packs, which we hire from Loscam. And that creates a relationship between us, Loscam, and of course our client, Mitsubishi Motors. So then if you think of the geography of it too, we're moving product out of Mitsubishi's warehouses, which are in Melbourne and in Brisbane, and we're moving those parts across the whole east coast of Australia, Tasmania, South Australia and Northern Territory. And we're often doing it quite quickly, because if you've got your car in for a service, you know, it's very important that we get those parts there so that they can repair the vehicle and get it back on the road.
Great, thanks, Craig. And maybe if you could give a bit more context around the project that you do work with Mitsubishi Motors on and the motivation behind looking for a track and trace solution.
Sure. So we started our journey with Mitsubishi probably about 10 years ago, because we helped them with the supply chain consulting and decentralizing and outsourcing. Then in 2019, we commenced Mitsy's, well, we call them Mitsy, it's Mitsubishi Motors. We commenced their transportation and we basically, as I said before, it's coming out of 2 warehouses, one in Melbourne, one in Brisbane, out to 200 dealerships. So our relationship with them is very strong. We are committed to some different customer experiences to their dealers. And again, G-packs, which we hire from Loscam on behalf of Mitsubishi, are an important part of that. Us having the right number in the right place so that we can return them and they can be packed into by the Mitsubishi warehouses is obviously very, very important. We also use those Loscam G-packs at our own cross docks. So if we're merging freight or orders that has come in from different sources going to a large dealership, we'll often use those G-packs and we'll pack them into that, and that protects the freight and the order all the way to the dealership. Again, when you think of the geography that we're covering, the number of dealerships we touch, and the fact that there aren't infinite number of G-packs that we can hire or afford to hire on behalf of Mitsi, tracking them really was a no-brainer in concept. It was always the trick that no one had a cost-effective solution. It had always been a dream more than a reality. So from our point of view, when Michael from Loscam suggested to us that we could track the units, we got pretty excited about that idea, because we'd looked at things in the past and could never make them pay. And, you know, working with people like Loscam, who had a relationship with Thinxtra, that just took us straight into doing a trial live. So it was really live in front of a studio audience, really. We didn't have any test. We just went live with the G-packs and we were moving them around the country and learning tracking as we went.
Great. And Craig, you mentioned there that you were very excited about this this technology. So where did you see the opportunity for track and trace?
Yeah, I think if we just get down to tin tacks quickly, you know, when we hire these units from Loscam, Mitsubishi and us are holding hands on the risk of loss. Each GPAC is worth something of the order of $2,000. And when you're hiring hundreds of them, the risk that you are taking adds up pretty quickly. So really the opportunity we saw first was not losing them, you know, because you don't want to be paying, you know, 100 of them at $2,000. That adds up pretty quickly. And also we were very interested in tracking them because we were hiring a number into the fleet based on experience with Mitsubishi, or their experience. And we always thought there were too many in the fleet. So we were very interested in the opportunity to understand what was happening, tracking what was happening to them, and then scaling back. So that's really where we saw the opportunity. And we went in very interested, but pretty skeptical.
Great, thanks, Craig. And just head back to you, Loic. And Daniel spoke earlier about the sort of challenges that he'd experienced with previous, you know, technology that he was exploring. So how did you go about helping Loscam overcome those challenges that they had when it came to implementing IoT for asset tracking?
Yeah. So Daniel mentions the cost were too high, the battery didn't last long enough, and not enough coverage if you try to explore alternatives to the traditional 3G and 4G networks. Because we are born in IoT, we know it's our job to solve all these problems at once, because otherwise it just becomes too hard. And as Craig mentioned, then just it's, you know, track and trace becomes, you know, goes in a too hard basket. So we have to solve all these at once. So to do that, it's about making sure and giving Loscam a way to collect information from their GPACs at the right information with the right battery life at the right cost and at the right time. So we really partnered and just trying to understand how much information was required to help Craig and the Mitsubishi Motors team understand, like reduce loss and at the end of the day, try to scale back. And that's what we, you know, keeping in mind the business objectives, we designed the solution accordingly. So the right tracker, we've got, you know, there are hundreds of zero-G enabled solutions globally that could be fit for purpose, but you need to find the right one for that application. And so we did recommend the right one. Then making sure that zero-G was the right connectivity, because it's not fit for purpose all the time. In the case of these GPACs, because of the battery life and the cost constraints, that was the right call. And then it's about being very focused in the implementation. So really it was about focusing on simplifying the journey for Loscam, so Michael and Daniel and the team to connect the GPACs in the most simple way.
Brilliant, thank you, Loic. And just before we delve a bit deeper into the benefits, we're very keen to sort of find out, you know, what the audience thinks. So we're just going to run a quick poll here on where you're at in your own IoT journey. So if you can just let us know there, that'd be great. And so we'll just move back over to you, Daniel. Could you run us through some of the benefits that you've seen since you've deployed a track and trace solution?
So certainly. So I think initially for us, we had to go through that initial proof of concept, making sure that the technology did what it said it would do, and the connectivity was as well spread out as what had been claimed. And so we ran a few trials, and along with partnering with Craig and Active, we also partnered in one instance with a grocery retailer. And I remember sitting there with our project lead, Michael Winter, and we tracked a delivery coming down from Sydney to Melbourne, and we were literally watching the truck move along the Hume highways and progress its way down south. But one of the things that we did notice, because we're actually tracking the temperature as well as location, that the consignment was getting colder and colder. And the customer who was assisting with the trial realised that it was a chiller product, but that had incorrectly been put into a frozen vehicle. And so there was an intervention that was able to be made there to all of a sudden, move that product into an alternate vehicle to avoid losing the consignment in its entirety. And I guess for us, that was a bit of a light bulb moment. It was like, okay, a motivation for us being an equipment pooling company was tracking the equipment. No lost equipment means happy customer, but then all of a sudden it's like, well, this is actually a lot more powerful than that. There's so much more that can be derived as a side product to tracking the asset itself. And looking, so that was the immediate benefit that we were able to realise. And then when you read through the article in the MHD magazine, and Craig talks about the efficiencies that have been gained. So yes, he's not losing the units anymore, which is great. But he's also had an improvement in the efficiency of the use of the units. And so they've been able to reduce the volume that they're requiring average on hire. They've seen an improvement in the administration costs associated, and sort of goes on from there. And so that was, again, really critical for us, because it meant when we're doing a feasibility study internally and trying to assess it to say, okay, does this make sense? Should we be spending money in this space? If all we were doing is isolating it down to tracking the asset, it's probably harder to build that case. But when you look at all the other add-on advantages, not only for us, but for our customers, then, it was very, very easy to justify. And I think it was very important for us because, as I said, it's another very sincere effort from Loscam and our team in putting solutions out there that mitigate that overall risk of not only losing the asset, but now also trying to create efficiencies within their own supply chain. So as I said, this is where it's been really exciting for us. Great, thanks, Daniel, and great to hear about those far-reaching benefits sort of beyond the loss rate. So Craig, could you also give us some insights into the benefits that you've seen for Mitsubishi Motors since they've adopted Loscam's solution?
Sure, Mel. I think Daniel has covered a lot of it, and I think we might touch on it later on. But the partnership focus here between Loscam, us, our client Mitsubishi, and Thinxtra has certainly, been terrific, because it's all just been about getting the better solution. So of course Daniel probably knows as much about this as I do, but really we were focused in the start, as I said before, about not losing the GPACs, and we're also focused on trying to work out why we thought there was about 30% more in the network than we thought we needed. So as we got started, as is typical with a lot of IT projects, we had to deploy for Mitsubishi without trackers on all the GPAC units. And pretty quickly, it was actually within 3 months, we'd lost 100 of them. So that was a pretty good effort, really. We just couldn't find these GPACs in the network. We didn't know where they were. They weren't tracked. And of course, as we lost them, our ability to return them to the Mitsubishi warehouse to be packed didn't go very well. So a lot of pressure came on us from Mitsubishi, also from their warehouse provider, which was pretty fair. And they started to deploy a lot of cardboard to get the orders moving instead of using the GPACs. So we then set about finding them. And I probably won't tell the audience how much time and money we spent, but let's just say it's a word starting with S and finishing with loads. We just spent a lot of time trying to find these things. We did find them, and we probably really bothered a lot of the dealers a bit more than we wanted to. We found them eventually, gave them back to Loscam, got them tracked. As soon as they were tracked, it was unbelievable for us just to have the visibility of where they were being held, where the delay points were. And all of a sudden we could get a scheduled return program, which we still use today, to make sure we've always got the GPAC sitting ready to go at the Mitsubishi warehouses. So I think the other thing we saw then is, as we got control, we could also see our GPACs moving through competitor networks. And that sort of happens in this game because a lot of people hire GPACs from Loscam and they all look a little bit similar. So we could see that and then start meaningful discussions with those other transport companies. And again, it was terrific to see Loscam jump in and help us with some of that, because it'd be easy for Loscam to say, well, you've lost it, you owe us $2,000. But instead of doing that, they did jump in and help us. And then we managed around month 10. So having lost 100 in month 3, by around month 10, we managed to de-hire the 30% we never thought we needed. And that saved Mitsubishi tens of thousands of dollars a year in hire costs. So we sort of saw a benefit pretty quickly. And we also saw in reality what happens when they're not tracked. And we've also educated the dealers, who are a big part of the Mitsubishi solution, obviously. And instead of us calling them and asking them where the GPACs are, we can now have a really good conversation with them about, you've got 3 of our units, they've been there a week, could you just go find them, or we'll send our driver or our team over and pick them up. So that's really been a soft benefit that has just changed a lot of the relationships for us and Mitsubishi inside the solution that we just didn't expect. We just weren't looking for that, but it certainly made our conversations right around the network a whole bunch easier and a whole bunch less anxious.
Brilliant, great to hear those benefits trickling down, through the supply chain, but also those, the ability to have those meaningful discussions. Really impressive. So we'll talk a bit about, I guess, the process now. So I'll come back to you, Loic. So, what does the process look like when someone wants to, work with Thinxtra and explore these solutions?
So it's a true partnering approach. We need to keep in mind what are the business outcomes that are required, and that that our customers need, basically. So on one end, and that sets, if you may, the economic feasibility. So we need to understand that quite clearly, and within these parameters, then we look at the operational scalability. And to do that, there's a discovery process. We call it the day in the life of an asset. So we literally think like a GPAC for a day or for a month. What type of conditions or environments the GPAC will be exposed to? Is it going to be hot, cold, outside, shocked? Is it going to be cleaned? Which type of caustic chemicals will be used? All this needs to be understood, because if you miss a couple of parameters, it will delay the project, because you'll need to take it into account. So you might as well go deep in the day in the life of your assets, and then absorb all the operational requirements, and make sure that you design a solution that can scale. So that will work for the now and tomorrow. So that's about finding that balance, this iterative process between the economic feasibility and the operational scalability.
Great, and more specifically with Loscam, how did you enable a solution that fitted their operational needs?
Well, with Loscam, I'd say it's we worked with Michael and their team just to really understand where where to attach the units, making sure that it was protected, that when you fold them, it's just basically it was going through that journey and making sure it was fit for purpose.
Great. And Daniel, if we can just come back to you, and if you could just talk us through, what was involved from your side when it came to implementing this solution.
Well, fair to say the team probably spent a week trying to explain to me what IoT meant. And based on our virtual backgrounds, I still think that I'm perhaps not in the IoT virtual world. I'm still at our depot network. But look, there was obviously a bit of an internal education process involved in getting an understanding of how this differs to other things that have sort of crossed our paths in the past. The proof of concept was easy enough. We were able to take sort of off-the-shelf devices and a sort of a ready-made portal that we could tap into just to get that ball rolling. The real heavy lifting came as once we sort of saw that it worked and we got excited about the idea is how do we integrate this into our day-to-day workings? And there's quite a bit of work involved there, particularly from the IT piece. We have a system called Loscam Online, and that's customer-facing portal for a lot of our day-to-day transacting. And we're bringing this now as a completely sort of different kettle of fish into this now to seamlessly integrate. And there's a lot of work that has to go on in the background in doing that, and with a particular focus around the data security. And again, that was sort of a big point that was emphasised to us early. And Craig touched on it earlier as well, that it is pooled equipment. We can have an asset move from one customer to another customer to another customer, all in the case of 3 days. And sometimes those customers are competitors. And so, you don't necessarily want customer A seeing what customer B is doing with the equipment 2 days after they've already transferred it on. So there's quite a lot of work involved in getting us to that. Also, finding the right hardware. And I guess, and this has really been, the point for us that has emphasised the importance around the partnering. Not only partnering with, fantastic customers like Craig and his business in sort of assisting with the proof of concept, but service providers like Loic and his team at Thinkstree. And if they weren't able to do something in particular, they were able to facilitate the right introductions. And so that was huge for us in getting us to where we are today.
Great, and great to hear about the collaboration with the partners, but maybe more on the sort of internal side. What was the change management process like? Yeah,
look, I guess the big challenge for us there as well is that we have been sort of in this space now for nearly 80 years. And so there's a lot of old heads kicking around. Mine's probably one of them who's sort of stuck in certain ways of doing things. And this is very left field for us. But it really was about getting the right team of people together who are really sort of driven for the right outcome. And that, we were very, very fortunate on that front. There was sort of some wiser heads than mine that were able to sort of throw that at it and really give them some free rein to run with it. We're very well supported by our corporate entity who sees this as well as, very much the future. And again, finding customers that were willing to sort of get out of their comfort zone and assist. And the benefit for us in doing that way is that we knew that by the time that we sort of ultimately landed on the right solution, and we partnered with customers who'd gotten excited along the journey, along the way with us, that it was, we're going to have already sort of customers ready to go in taking these traceable units on hire. And so that sort of goes a long way also to building the business case internally in getting that where it needed to be. I will say that with these IT projects, sometimes companies, and we've been guilty of it as well, we sort of approach it with a sort of tick the box exercise. It's sort of half-hearted. You'll go through the motions, but you maybe don't necessarily really believe in it, or you're throwing sort of more reasons why it won't work than why it should work along the way. But this one from the outset had a different feel, and as I said, we really had the can-do attitude, and the team were motivated from the outset and continue to be so.
Brilliant there. And Craig, how did Mitsubishi sort of react to the data you were collecting and the benefits that you were able to realise for them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Mitsi approached us in this whole exercise very strategically. They were just really on board. People have to remember that this was brand new technology. They were sceptical. We were a little bit sceptical, although we did trial it by putting in someone's pocket. And we did watch them wander around Adelaide to different 7-Elevens and stuff before we went live. But, we were going live with it, and they were just very, very keen to make sure we and Loscam could prove the technology. So over time, especially as they saw us lose units and then put the trackers on and find them, that was, probably step one for them. And then the game changer was when we turned on the geofencing. So the geofencing allowed us to get an alert, which came in the form of an email, when a GPAC that was tracked, obviously, crossed into an area or a competitor or somewhere it wasn't meant to be. Once we got those, so we weren't just looking at, so many hundred units and where they might be, we knew the ones that were actually the challenge or the problem for us. That let us react quickly. It again helped us present these GPACs in a timely manner back to the warehouses where they were meant to be. And also let us collect them out of competitor networks in a reasonable amount of time. That really was the game changer moment for Mitsubishi. And I think really what that's allowed now, Mel, is they've asked us, we gave them 30% reduction in the fleet in month 10. We're now looking at reducing the fleet further based on actual data. And I think they're just really, really excited about the fact that we're dealing with them, all their partners, the warehouse providers they've got, all the dealers who are partners of Mitsubishi as well. We're dealing with everybody with facts, and we're not making it up as we go. So I think that's just really, really cemented in their mind that this was a really good decision about 2 years ago.
And how do you think that will, I guess, influence their decisions moving forward after this?
Yeah, I think they'll continue to take measured strategic risks now. So again, if we can reduce the fleet, I think that, or the GPAC fleet, that's probably bad for Daniel, but good for Mitsubishi and us. And I think it'll just, for them, it just sorted out a lot of the large dealer networks. When you think of an automotive company selling parts and accessories to a large dealership, that large dealership often has multiple brands. They're pretty busy. They're servicing their own dealers. And the last thing they need is a whole bunch of noise and silly discussions about what they see as silly, GPAC units. We use them, but it's not the dealer's problem. So I think for them, it's just really helped them cement that the GPACs are a good solution. It certainly reduces the carbon footprint with cardboard. And I think it just gives them more clarity that they can run it cleanly moving forward because the units are tracked.
Brilliant. So we're just going to run a second poll now, just asking the audience why we don't see more connected assets in the supply chain. So please share your thoughts with us on that. And then just before we go into the Q&A, I just wanted to ask, I'd be interested, Loic, to sort of hear your experience and where you've seen other successful deployments of mass IoT beyond this project.
So in Australia and New Zealand, there are some pretty large beer keg tracking projects using zero-G connectivity that's like both Convoy and Kegstar, who are keg rental companies, are tracking their kegs. And that makes a lot of sense to help the kegs move faster in the supply chain and also enhance the customer experience. It's not about automotive dealers, it's about brewers that don't really care about kegs, but they want their beer to be better delivered to their customers. So that's, I think, a pretty large-scale project. Around the world, DHL has rolled out 250,000 trackers, zero-G trackers on roll cages across their postal network in Germany. Now it's scaling beyond that. You've got all other automotive manufacturers like Peugeot who are connecting their whole supply chain, all their ULDs across Europe. So some pretty large projects that are scaling, and it's fantastic to just replicate this and do it, apply this locally in Australia and New Zealand. So that, I think, that'd be where we see mass IoT in the supply chain locally and globally. There are other applications of mass IoT, in the facility management sector, with utilities, but I think that's not the topic for today.
Great, lots of opportunity. So we've just got a question for you, Daniel, just about the units that we're discussing today. Someone was asked, can you provide some details on coverage and battery life?
Yeah, so one of the challenges certainly was in ensuring that we had a sufficient battery life to have enabling reasonably frequent pinging back to home base. The units in which we're implementing, we anticipate will having no worse than 5-year battery life, and they will be replaceable batteries. So that's more than acceptable for us. In relation to coverage, I think Loic sort of, I'm always nervous about it, saying how much of the country they have covered. It's always an improving position, but I think they're well over 95% of the populated. Loic, please correct me if I'm wrong. But we haven't yet put a unit somewhere where we couldn't see it. So that's going along pretty well.
Brilliant.
Yeah, very much, pretty much like most of the urban, semi-urban areas across Australia and New Zealand are already covered. And that means, you know, in the case of Mitsubishi, like, and like wherever the GPACs go, there was no problem tracking them. Where it becomes like when there is the need of extension, that we will, our team will just densify and expand the network to follow our customer needs.
Great. And Craig, and I know this is something that we discussed when I interviewed you for the MHD article, but I'd be interested to hear from you on sort of how the solution changed the way that you communicate across the supply chain and those relationships.
Yeah, we touched on it before also, Mel. It's really because the industry hasn't had a tracking solution. In fact, the GPACs don't even have a unique identifier. You know, it's not like it's GPAC G5123 with a barcode. They're really, it's quite a rudimentary system before we put trackers on it. So because of that, and because we've all been in warehouses in our lives, or we've been in transport depots and we've seen other people's ULDs, other people's pallets. Some of the pallets might have been red when they started and they've been painted green as if they weren't really Loscams in the first place. So we've all seen that. So these units and all assets, all hire assets do get lost, do end up in the wrong spot. So I think really the communication for us, it's just been a terrific change to be able to have conversations with the Siva warehouses who do the work for Mitsubishi, to have conversations with competitor networks, to have conversations with very large dealers who are getting Nissan product delivered, they're getting Toyota product delivered, Ford product for that matter delivered. So to have a conversation with them, and it's all fact-based, and we take the emotion out of it, and we just work through these assets are expensive. You might not value them, but we in Mitsubishi definitely do. And it's just sort of calmed all those conversations down. And certainly that and a number of the other initiatives we believe, and we've heard from the Mitsubishi team, just helps them with their dealer relationships, because they're into creating mutual value. No one wants to be adversarial with your customer or your supplier. Well, you shouldn't want to be. And it's really just changed a lot of those conversations. And as I've said before, I just think it's been such a mature strategic decision by Loscam to pursue this, because really, you know, they can just take the view we lose it, we pay, but they know those conversations aren't much fun for us in Mitsubishi, you know, down the track either. So anyway, that's probably my simple view of it, Mel. It really has changed the way we all communicate on what can be quite a tough topic.
Brilliant. And Daniel, a question here for you. So how does the tracking recognise equipment when the assets are transferred?
Yeah, so this is one of the real complications for us, because I think it was important that the solution works within the dynamic supply chain. That is, that customers who are moving the goods from one customer to another. And so again, we've sort of worked everything within our Loscam online system, where customers are already going to notify us of a transfer of an asset on any given day. And it'll be no different to how they're currently transferring the assets, albeit that with a trackable asset, it's obviously got a unique barcode, which will be able to be selected as to nominate which asset is going where, if there's different customers involved. They would update that updates immediately through our online portal, and then, you know, they'll either start seeing the unit if it's been transferred on, or they'll cease seeing it from the transfer off. And again, that's been a lot of the challenge for us in the background in building that capability within the system. But for us, it was critical that it was very easy to use and complementary to our already existing customer-facing portal in Loscam Online.
Great. And Loic, question here. Sorry, would this be available for smaller businesses as well?
Yes, there are a lot of track and trace solutions available off the shelf, and it's even easier when it's made available from via Loscam, who's dealing with companies that are of multiple sizes. So yes, we've got customers that track hundreds of thousands of assets because they see value in it, but some that have just 50 and just want to know where they are, and that's not a problem at all.
Great. And we've got a question here from Daniel to you, Daniel, actually. Just looking for some details on the sort of physical appearance of the tracking device, like how large is it? Can it be easily fixed, removed?
Yeah, so I think there was a picture earlier in our slide presentation, and we may be able to get that up at some stage. Well, there we go.
I think Craig's got one, yeah.
That's great. Someone, that might be Craig's wife, obviously tracking him around the place, so that's good. But that's what the device looks like. It's comparable to probably a small stapler, and that's the same device that we're talking about in relation to the extensive battery life and all that additional information that can be provided in conjunction with the traceability.
Great. And another question for you, Daniel, from Belinda. So she's asking sort of how does Loscam benefit from the project? You know, if there's been a 30% reduction in fleet for Mitsubishi, how does that benefit you guys?
Belinda works in our corporate office. Yes, no, that's a good question, but it's, you know, for me, as I said, I've done 21 years within Loscam, and yeah, believe it or not, when I first started, I had a beautiful blonde hair, and the thing that cost me more hair than anything else has been having difficult conversations with customers who have lost assets. And you know, even though, yes, in the case of with Mitsubishi now, they've been able to consolidate and streamline. We really celebrate that. You know, I won't have any problem in rehousing those G-Packs to other customers, because you know, they are literally lining up at the moment trying to, you know, access the traceability that's offered with these units. And I know that, you know, every year now I'll be able to sort of catch up with Craig, and we can have a nice Christmas lunch and talk about all things wonderful, and not the fact that, you know, he's missing assets and paying higher on units that he can't account for. So again, you know, and that's, I guess, you know, people who've talked to myself, or people in our business over the many years, would probably have heard about our intention to drive best practice. Some may have seen that as lip service, you know, but I think this is our best exclamation point on the fact that we are very sincere in that, and we'll continue to drive and invest in this, and just to put this out into more and more of our assets going forward, to remove or to mitigate that risk as much as we can.
Brilliant. And Loic, another question from Belinda here. So how many times a day is the data sent from the tracker, and to provide sort of details on where the asset is?
So I'm not privy to the exact configuration, but like generally, you would set up the units that it reports at least once a day, saying I'm here and I'm okay. But then if the device moves, if the GPAC units move, then it starts to report, say, hey, I've started to move. And then you can configure it to report as much as you want during movements. Many companies are not interested to know data about that movement. They just want to know the destination, where it arrived. So you'll be very light in terms of density of messaging. You will know the unit started to move and went outside of that geofence that Craig mentioned earlier, and then it arrived at 3 hours later at this location. And then after that, for the next couple of days, it will be one message a day. So that's a really elegant way to maximize the battery life, but you still get the information you need for your business case.
Great. So lots of options there. And Craig, maybe you can sort of shine a light on the specifics of, you know, how many times a day and when the details are shared with this project.
Yeah, so we were stunned that we were asked that question, because we just thought it would have an automatic, ping time. So we set them, because of the way the units move and the way the network works, we set it to be 6 p.m, then midnight, and then 6 a.m. So we could actually track them probably before they moved, as they were moving. Certainly, you know, Daniel used the Hume Highway. We can certainly see them moving past Albury around midnight, and then about 6 a.m, because that's where they're in their location, probably about to be delivered to a dealer. So we set it up for 3 times a day. Certainly the battery life, as Daniel was referring to before, is just stunning, because the other thing these units do is they do send their battery life in each ping. So if we've got a unit or a tracker that might be underbehaving, it has a battery life problem, that can be identified. We can then find that when we next see it, and we'll send that off to Loscam, and it can be fixed up and replaced. So it really is superb technology, and you can set it almost as often as you want to ping back at you.
Great. And Daniel, obviously lots of different value assets in your business. So Michael was asked, so is there's feasibility options for IoT or zero-G solutions, but for the lower valued assets, such as pallets, do you see that those lower value items can also benefit from track and trace?
I think that that's obviously going to be the end goal in getting as much of our equipment pool traceable as possible over the next period of time. At the moment, with the existing solution, it doesn't stack up just to have it sort of tracking an individual pallet en masse. But again, we are looking at very closely the fact that these devices could be made available to assist in tracking consignments. It could assist customers with doing sort of internal checkpoints around, where pallets are going and whether there's going to places that they, didn't think that they were going. You can do that sort of in a sample group. But most certainly, we're going to be kept very, very busy in rolling this out to our high value asset pool and sort of making our way down. And even in the time in which we've been exploring this, we're seeing, new tracking devices coming out, lower cost options. It's only going to be an improving technology. And we're talking about the size now of a small stapler, probably in 12 months' time, we're talking about it being, half that size again, if not more, and battery life getting closer to 10 years. So it's going to be a watch this space. That's certainly the end goal. That's probably our biggest challenge within our business at this stage. But it is, in my view, only really a matter of time.
Great. And I've got a question here from Alex that sort of, I guess, follows on from that. If we do get to that point where we can track wooden pallets with this kind of technology, does that offer an opportunity to also sort of automate the pooling process, so it won't only just be about lost pallets, but other efficiencies? What do you think, Daniel?
Look, absolutely, Alex, and it sounds like potentially he may have had a experience where lost pallets and the frustration associated with that, and again, for us, we could sit back and just wait for it all to make sense for a pallet itself, but that wouldn't be right. We're moving this into the higher value assets, but it will be again a watch this space. The pallet does add a further little complication with the fact that with the timber pallet itself, every part is replaceable, repairable. So you sort of have a bit of a hidden challenge as to where you put the tracking device within the pallet. But these things, will be overcome over time. And yes, I'm sure that we'll be transacting very, very differently, over the near future in relation to how transfers are notified, how stock counts are taken place. Like for instance, we still have 2 people walking around our yards every morning counting physical assets. With this sort of technology now, you can have have that whole process automated. So again, it's exciting. There is still quite a bit of heavy lifting to be done, but certainly Loscam, we're going to be at the forefront of this thinking and looking to drive this as hard as we can.
Right. And a question here from Brenton for Loic. So if the unit was to sort of ping only once a day, what sort of battery life would we be looking at then?
Obviously, it depends on the size of the battery and the tracker, but the types of trackers we're talking about here would be 7 to 10 years if you just ping once a day. That is achievable, yeah. Again, it varies, but 7 to 10 years would be the way to go.
Yeah, impressive. Okay, well, I think that concludes the webinar for today. Thank you to all of the panelists for the great insight that you've given us, and I'm sure there's lots of key takeaways for the attendees to consider. And if anyone has any further questions, feel free to reach out to all of the panelists. We will also send you a recording of today. But thank you very much for joining us, and thanks again to the panelists.
Thank you, Mel. Thanks for having us. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Mel.